Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show. Yeah, that's my regular opening. Uh, Bottom line, as you can see on the screen, my co-pilot once again, my regular co-pilot, Matt Wilhelm, former Ohio State linebacker, former NFL linebacker of great repute. Matt Wilhelm, welcome once again to the Tim May Show.
Thanks for having me, bud. It's always good to talk.
Yeah, but you know why I'm having you. I mean,
Of
obviously
course.
we set this up well before the bowl game, but hardly anyone pulls fewer punches when they're talking about Ohio State, college football, et cetera, than my friend Matt Wilhelm. And Matt, I just wanted to get you, maybe give me a one word take.
Sure.
Here we are a few days away from Ohio State 3, Missouri 14 in the Cotton Bowl. Ohio State wraps up an 11-2 season. I'm not sure wraps it up is the right term. It's more like folded it up and threw it away to a certain extent. You don't forget about the 11, but the 2 hang out there. But to see your alma mater get beat 14-3 in the Cotton Bowl by basically the third, maybe fourth best team in the Southeastern Conference this past season, what's your take?
One
One
word.
word.
I've
One
got
word.
one word, and the first one that pops into my mind is disappointment. Uh, and I
That's
think
pretty
that,
tame. Yeah.
yeah. I also think, I mean, the other one thing that as a former player, and I'm sure many of us feel the same way, is embarrassing. And so much of that has to do with kind of the narrative I even took after losing to that team up north and being kind of partnered with Missouri in the Cotton Bowl. Non-January 1st bowl game, non-CFP bowl game. You don't beat Michigan. You don't play in the Big Ten championship. Um, just a lot of boxes left unchecked by what that 20, what was it, 2020 recruiting class, that
Yeah.
Marvin and these
2021 mainly.
20,
Yeah.
2021 mainly.
Yeah.
Just I'm a little bit in shock. I was not ecstatic to be partnered with Missouri. It didn't have the luster of the type of, I'll call it, say, the college football matchup that I think an Ohio State 11-1 Ohio State football program should be playing against. Missouri's had a once in a decade type of season in the SEC, as you mentioned. The third, fourth, or fifth best team, although they were better than that this year. They're
Yeah.
just they're just not a football school, And I know that, and it's like, and again, if I had enough drinks in me and you asked me, prior to the game, what conference did they even play in, I might even still say they're in the Big 12.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but it was just it just wasn't great. Nothing was good enough. I think that everybody that I've talked to, and I'm sure you've done the same in the last couple of days, that that are fans of Ohio State football and also very critical of Ohio State football is,
Yeah.
if our offense just is good, you win the game. 24-14, 28-14,
Yeah.
whatever. But it just, I mean, from the top down, and I'm going to be extremely critical of the offense. I think that, the offensive line was porous. Why the rotation? Why this combination? Why you stick with it? I don't necessarily know. It's unfortunate that Devin Brown, gets hurt, but he didn't do enough when he was in to show me that he's the guy next year. So it kind of leaves us with 9 months of, wheels turning. You throw in the freshman, and I don't discount that freshman getting thrown in the fire. He should have gotten 25% of the game planning reps, like most other teams do, whether college and professional football. You got to have that next guy up, next guy ready to be able to execute the offense. We shouldn't be able to run a playbook this big with one guy and this big with the next guy. And then to just remove myself and watching other bowl games. A lot of other true freshmen just got thrown in there in the fire, whether it was, the Georgia backup, or other kids who had opt out, or quarterbacks that left via the transfer portal had true freshmen. I know they might have gotten the bulk of the offseason bowl game reps in practice to then go out and execute, but they executed. And I think that's the one thing that I'm a little lost about is all of these highly touted 3, 4, 5-star freshmen and sophomores that have stuck around to play in the bowl game. None of them really jumped off the page and impressed. And when you watch Georgia and you watch Bama and you watch Clemson and you watch other schools that routinely recruit inside the top 10, their freshmen are participating and playing very well. throughout the season, and then participating and playing very well in the bowl game as well, which is a
Yeah.
little bit of a disappointment that I think big time. We're at a crossroads. I think the leash, every time Ryan Day loses to Michigan, everybody's calling for his head because of the success that we've been able to enjoy for the last 20 years with Urban and Tress. It's not the same. Ohio State football is not the same. And I think we're at a little bit of a crossroads with, the NIL and what needs to happen with those collectives around Columbus and to support this football team. I think, for the first time, the transfer portals really hit Ohio State football. We've kind of avoided it the last few years. A few guys here or there, that's natural, but to have 13, now 14, another receiver hits the portal, today or yesterday when he announced the Rogers kid. So it's just, we're in an uncharted territory. And I'm not questioning, do we have the right guy, leading the ship? I think we do. I just think that you go back to, and I think we had a similar conversation last year, coming out of that loss to Michigan of like, what's going to be different coming into the 2024 football season. And so I think there's a lot of soul searching amongst the coaches and players on what 2024 looks like.
Yeah. I want to hit on something though, back in the game, because if I'm looking at a facet of the Ohio State football team against Missouri, I've rarely, I'm trying to think, you have to go back to the late 80s when John Cooper took over and the cupboard was bare, to see an offensive line, in my opinion, that played as poorly as that offensive line played. I mean, we can sit here and talk about Devin Brown and Lincoln Keenholz. In my opinion, and I said this after the game on radio, TV, and YouTube with LettermenRow.com, they never had a chance, man. I mean,
No.
Missouri, everybody, number one, you got a first-time starting quarterback in Devin Brown. Anybody should know they're going to come after him with everything they've got, make him make fast decisions. And then when you put Lincoln Keenholz in there and it's on the 5-yard line coming out, they're going to come after him. They didn't successfully block these delayed blitzes.
Tim,
wait a minute, let me finish. Ohio State, the quarterbacks had free runners at them almost all night.
But
coming
Tim,
off the edge.
And when you actually go back in and watch the film, and I've not watched it in its entirety, it's not even, yes, the delayed blitzers and the blitzers, right? But their four
exactly
are winning consistently versus our 5.
Oh yeah.
And here's where I think, and it's not something, I can't say that I've been a head coach at the college football level before, or I've been a coordinator or a play caller at the college football level. So I'm being critical as a former player who's been in a situation and been around it. Like, we should have been in max if we weren't handling their front, we should have released 3 and maybe check released to back out. Yeah. We should have run more quicks. I thought, and I think it's a little bit of something that's been consistent maybe against Ryan Day's play calling, is so many down the field routes. Like every route is, say, 8 yards or farther. And it's great when you hit a Buka over the middle in those big windows. It's great. And you love Marvin getting open because he can win off the jam or off a press bail, whatever it is, because he's just so hyper elite. Yeah. But when you're working with the guys that we have, and the quarterback, I just thought creative, quick game, crossers, slants, RPOs that put a little bit of question in the defender's mind and make very, very and/or decisions for our young quarterbacks, and a line that had not played together, but in this football game. Yeah. There were ways offensively that you could have schemed up better protection, even against guys who were getting beaten one-on-one situations. There's a back there ready to hit that guy, as opposed to being a free runner to the quarterback. Instead of scat releasing that back quickly, getting him into a route and releasing 5. At some point you have to go, if we can't protect, we can release 7 and guys can be open. If we don't have the time to throw the football and throw it accurately, we're never going to get a first down. And then I just think, we didn't run the game was always within reach. So we didn't run the ball all that successfully. It
was 3-0 going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, Travion had a decent game. He didn't pop the big run, like he had in that like I'll say that last 5-game stretch of the football season. But we were making yards on the ground. I just thought there's ways creatively that we could have used Missouri's aggressive nature, rushing those young quarterbacks against them, bubble screens, tunnel screens, jet sweeps. Again, the implementation. I mean, Cade Stover, who was playing on one leg essentially,
Yeah.
sacrificing his body for his team. Like, are there not ways where we can just, run little Travis Kelce type read routes against zone where he just sits down, for 4 yards, turns and gets 6 by falling forward, and now you're in 2nd and 4.
Yeah.
I thought there were situations where coaching could have helped the players that were actually playing the game, which I don't think happened.
Yeah, right. By the way, Ryan admitted that after the game. Especially when they were throwing a bunch of zero coverage. Zero backside at them. There were all kinds of ways they could have gone. My point was that should have been expected. I mean, you should have been
Yes.
expecting them to come after your first-time starting quarterback and then your freshman quarterback. That should have been so much a part of the game plan to counter that, and you didn't see it.
No.
That's a fail. That's a fail. And then the offensive line, there's nobody on that offensive line that has video coming out of that game they want to show anybody.
No.
In my opinion, they all took turns being a turnstile, And when Devin Brown boldly, bravely went back into the game and got smashed on just a speed rush around Josh Simmons, the left tackle. The guy just ran and just smashed him into the ground about as hard as you can smash a quarterback into the ground. Here's Devin Brown out there trying to play on one foot. That to me was the what do you want to call it? The example play of how things went poor and then really bad for the Ohio State offense. Do you agree with that?
I agree completely. And I think that, even the run game, when we got yards, it wasn't like we were mauling them. It was like we were just covering up, and we had an elite back running behind,
exactly
a covered up offensive line. And that's the reason why we couldn't pop the big run, because we weren't, comboing up to the backer, and there was an unblocked safety that makes it for a 7-yard gain. So I hate to say it wasn't the Ohio State football we had even seen in the 12 prior games. It wasn't the Ohio. And Marvin's an amazing player. Marvin's, when he declares for the NFL draft, he'll be a top 5 draft pick. But you can't tell me the way that we recruit, especially at the wide receiver position, and the fact that we're freaking Ohio State, we should get the pick of the litter, of getting a top 5 quarterback every recruiting class if we want one.
Yeah.
That we got these guys that can't deliver, that we can't deliver the football. So there's something, there's something off. And I can't necessarily say, I know there's, it's not that I'm on many fan boards, but I dabble in it because I find it entertaining.
You dabble in it.
But it's like, I can't necessarily say, and this is no shot against Brian Hartline, but like Brian Hartline calling the plays isn't immensely going to be better, because he's never called plays before. He's been giving insight to Ryan Day on play calling in their meetings and construction of a game plan, but not actively been on the card in a game.
Yeah.
I can also say, everybody wants to say, Urban come back. Urban's sitting behind a desk right now talking about college football, making $3 million. Why
Urban ain't coming back? Urban is very happy with what he's doing. Go ahead.
100%. And then it's also the other name that gets thrown out there is Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel's making $8 million, on a rebuild in Tennessee and one of the worst divisions in football. So he's really not going to go there. And then frankly, like, why? I hate to say this, and that's why I said this all season long, even last year. It's like, okay, everybody wants Ryan Day gone, but like, who's the savior that they're going to anoint to like actually like that you can guarantee is going to beat Michigan and guarantees and now we're going to be a 12-team playoff, but be in the college football playoff. But like Vrabel, may not want to come here and just he's already under the NFL pressure. Why would he want to come here? Alma mater, been a coach here, come back. Is he going to be able to recruit the quarterback? Is he going to be able to, so there's just, you can say a lot of things and a lot of people can blow a lot of hot air, but the absolute execution of it is so many layers to it.
Well, let's get to it. I want to ask you this. Let's stay on the coaching front.
Yeah.
Where are you most disappointed from a group standpoint with this team that maybe you think a change should be made? Or I don't know. I like Justin Fry a lot, but that offensive line, never became that juggernaut offensive line,
No,
all through the
no.
season.
So,
Now they're dealing with some recruiting mistakes, et cetera, that were made before he ever showed up. You know what I mean? But I'm just looking at that offensive line play on against Missouri, and I'm just going, that was poor. I mean, that was
yeah,
like Southeastern Missouri playing Missouri
yeah,
offensively. It
yeah,
was. I
yeah.
mean,
But
they were intimidated. They were overmatched. They couldn't handle the speed. You're going to hear these, just like you guys were hearing going into the you're going to hear that this Southeastern Conference once again wins on speed. You know what I mean?
yeah,
That's going to
of
be
course. Well,
all.
Tim, the one thing that I think why it's so frustrating, disappointing, embarrassing, because um, we are us in Michigan. We'll consider ourselves, and we're the
Yeah.
cream of the crop when it comes to the Big Ten. And
Yes.
when you think Big Ten football, what do you think? Right? At least,
Yes.
as I'll say, the 25 years of Big Ten football that I've either played in it or been a part of it, you think toughness and physicality,
Physicality.
right?
Yeah.
And then you look at that offensive line, and it's the complete opposite of it. It's in shambles. There's no physicality. It's like we're playing on our heels and intimidated, as opposed to imposing our will, running the football when we want to, protecting. And again, think back to, you know, Fields and Stroud and Haskins, standing there like statues, almost to a fault, to then be told to have to take off and run the
Yeah.
football because
Yeah.
they wanted their skilled receivers working down the field, and they just want to stand there and wait for them to break open because the ball moves faster 20 yards down the field than you could take off and run it with your legs for
Yeah.
20 yards.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was none of that, and I just don't know how I don't want to say fall, because it's like, I mean, we did fall to Missouri, but like, how can I think it's also it's a gift and a curse to have the Michigan kid come out and say, hey, I'm a hater and I'd love to like kick them while they're down in Ohio State, but that's not the team that we played on November 25th.
Yeah. I
And
don't
I'm
think
like,
I
amen, brother. Like
yeah.
it's not even close. The competitive nature of the guys. I think, and I'm not trying to say that anybody like mailed it in, but like, did we enjoy Dallas Fort Worth area, far too much ahead of the football game? Did we
Yeah.
have too many young players that don't understand, actually preparing to play a game because they didn't really have to do it all season long because they were a backup, they were one play away. But now,
but man, there's
just
been a lot said like that. But I mean, Cal McCord left. You and I've already covered that whole deal. Cal McCord left after the regular season was over. But you look at the offense, they're missing Cal McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr., their starting quarterback and the Biletnikoff Award winner, who opted out.
and Julian Fleming,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
was a
Julian
starter all
Fleming.
year.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I agree. But those guys, either hit the portal or are going to the NFL. You didn't have any other opt-outs, offensively, but then they make the change on their offensive line, put Carson Hinsman on the bench and move Matt Jones to center and Enoch Vamahi at right guard. And oh my goodness, that
Swiss
wasn't
cheese.
working. That wasn't working from the start. Carson Hinsman's there, tried to get a straight answer from Ryan Day about why that move was made, said something about the way, things had gone the last couple of weeks leading into the game. But middle of the game, you don't go back to your original, because you had your original lineup right there in front of you, which did a decent job on occasion this year. Even at Michigan, that great drive they had in the second half where they tied the game. My point is, there was never a change made in there.
No.
There were some occasionally early. There were some defensive linemen coming in disguised as linemen or backup linemen coming in. When they wanted to go overload or something. But otherwise, the revolving doors just kept operating all night. And you're right; they were beating them with 4-man rush, much less.
And Tim, having kind of like, and I know it's at the high school level and even at some college level, to be able to like, rub elbows with some coordinators and I'm not trying to make an excuse for anybody, because to your point about the offensive line, no change was made. And then even as the game went on, when, you're playing with Lincoln Klein, how do you say his last name?
Keenholz
is the quarterback. You're still running those down the field concepts, right? You're not giving him those quick opportunities.
Agreed.
What can happen in a game is because you've prepped now for 3 weeks to a month on, preparing for the way that things are gonna go with your guys and with what you think you're gonna see out of Missouri. That sometimes you can get that what you have in front of you becomes like your Bible, and you feel like you can't deviate from the 3 weeks worth of work that you've put in. So you keep digging through those files that you thought and looked really good, all bowl prep, and you never go, well, why don't we just go off script? So there are coaches that are following processes, that are following, their workflow that has always worked for them. But I just think there's also got to be, is there one guy on staff that just goes, hey guys, and that's
It
where
ain't
like
working.
I creatively sometimes, you can insert your foot in your mouth when you say it, and some people get a little pissed about it because there's a lot of ego and control involved in play calling, where you just go, dude, to your point, this ain't working. Why don't we XYZ? Instead of just saying this ain't working and you bitch and complain about it, you go, this ain't working. Why don't we go quicks? Why don't we go max protection? Why don't we work a little east-west to slow these guys down? And then we start knifing them. And that's going back to the Urban era.
Yeah.
Urban wanted to stress you wide to loosen you, and then he wanted to knife you with those downhill, zone reads, cute quarterback power type runs. So I don't know. I mean, that's to your point. You asked about what you like, what you didn't like. I think what you have to like about it is nothing about the offense, and then to go to the other side of the ball as a defender, you really liked a lot of what you saw out of the defense. I think they're stingy. They're aggressive. You still had you had no Tommy Eichenberg. You had Jack Sawyer playing out of his mind, which is what we as Buckeye fans expected. For the last 3 years as the highly touted recruit there out of Columbus that he was.
But you know what? No matter if he came late in the year, I mean, the last half of the season, you could see him getting better every week.
Yeah.
And whether it came finally for Jack Sawyer, man. I mean, wow.
Well, and remember, it was, I was also critical of those guys early in the season of like, him and JTT, those splash plays, like, where are they?
Yes.
They're just guys doing their job, and that's okay. They might have a winning grade, but they're not making the plays that we as Buckeye fans are accustomed to out of our defensive ends. Bosa brothers, Chase Young, I even said Tyquan Lewis, these guys that just show, John Simon, to just show up in big moments and make the play.
Sam Hubbard.
JTT's done it against Penn. Yeah, Sam Hubbard. You name it. So, but then also ultimately at the end of the day, just like the Michigan game, when the defense needed to get a stop and be the stingiest, and if your offense is struggling, Michigan goes on a 6-7 minute drive to kill the game, against us and not give the opportunity the ball back to our offense. Missouri, I think both drives were in the fourth quarter, maybe crossed.
Well, they ended, the one was going on at the transition. Two
drives of
touchdowns
over 8 plays
quarter.
that one goes for 91, one goes for 95. Yeah. And I think if you scripted it as the game flow, it's like, there's no way Missouri's going to go down the field and score. And they do. There's no way that Missouri's going to go down the field, the field again on this defense and score again. And they do. Yeah. And it's just so unfortunate. And it's not, but you have to love the step that was made by, Coach Knowles and this defense. I do think there's, some, and I'll call it the second, not having Tommy Eichenberg hurt us. Steele and John and Simon, did the best they could running around, but they're making tackles. They're not making plays. Yeah. And I think that's when you go back to the era of I'll call it like Ohio State's linebacker U era. That's Josh Perry, that's James Laurinaitis, that's AJ Hawk, that's Bobby, throw myself in there, that's Casson Moyer. Yeah. We would have 2 a game. 2 splat, 2 tackle, 2 TFLs a game, a forced fumble, a recovery, a punt, a peanut punch, an interception, a PBU, a something. We were just around the football. And it seems like, and I know the game has changed. Don't get me wrong. There's 4 wide, 3 wide, almost in every play out of shotgun. So it's different. But we look like spatially just making tackles, not making plays at the second level. So we'll see. It's going to be a very interesting time now that, what is Mike Hall's already declared? Does Denzel Burke come back? How many of these guys that, Ryan Day has kind of rallied around that said there's some unfinished business. They've said there's some unfinished business. Now, does what they've said coincide with what they're going to do?
Yeah.
Coming out of this bowl game.
It is interesting because like Bobby Bowden had this great line. You remember Bobby Bowden, the late Bobby Bowden, head coach at Florida State. He would talk to his teams at halftime, and if his team was leading at halftime, he said this every time. He goes, "All right, he's making adjustments," and he'd say this one thing. He'd go, "All right, now defense, they don't score in the second half, we win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sometimes comes down to the 3-0. Yeah, we'd be sitting there almost having the same podcast here, but
Yeah.
3-0 would have been a win.
We'd
And
be sitting up a
boy,
little higher, chest out a little bit.
you'd be talking about
Yeah.
this defense like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
and you're exactly right. It is a team game. And, Jack Sawyer and JT Tumola, when I talked to them after the game, they understood that. I thought the defense played its heart out in that
I do
game.
too.
They held that team, 25 or what's the number? 15, 20 points below its average. That should be good
quarterback
enough.
only threw for 128. The running
Yeah.
back, only ran for, he was a Heisman candidate for most of the year.
You preface with, 14, you should have won that game 20 to 14,
24-14, 21-14. Yeah, 27-14. It was sad. And I felt, I don't feel bad for anybody, but I feel like, there were ways while watching the football game that as a football guy, like I could call a play that can get a completion for Lincoln Kienholz, whatever his name is. Kienholz.
Yeah.
It's just like I could call a play, with a turnstile, offensive line that I can call a play to get a completion, to build a little confidence in this kid that'll put us in a keep us on schedule as opposed to always playing behind the sticks. And then that's when Missouri's going to pin their ears back and bring that pressure and roll some coverage behind us to confuse them.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, I know a lot of people have judged Devin. My middle kid, I've seen enough of Devin Brown. That was after his second possession, and I'm just going, dude, he's making his first start. He's going against a team that's coming after him. Give him time to get a feel for things. I mean, because it's the speed of the game there. I mean, Missouri's defense came out like their hair was on fire, but Ohio State did manage to get a field goal and then miss a field goal. So there was some progress made. But the thing about Devin Brown was, I was thinking all month leading up to it, if they lose Devin Brown early in this game, I thought we were going to see exactly what we saw. And but then past that, the play got hurt on was actually a great call. It was a quarterback draw, but one guy beat an offensive lineman, and boom, he just kind of gets, and you saw the play. Devin kind of is
cleats get stuck in the turf. Yeah,
exactly. But if he gets by that guy, there's like 20 yards before anybody touches.
Yeah.
You understand?
Sure.
That was what he was going to bring to the table. And so it's always all about serendipity or happenstance from one play to the next of how things work out. But like you said, to then be not since the college football playoff semis against Clemson in the Fiesta Bowl back in 2016 when they got shut out 31-0 Ohio State.
Yeah.
We were talking about Urban. Urban's had some, was literally unbeatable in the postseason, but that night they just got cold cocked.
Well, that's the one thing,
and had no answers. So this feels a lot like that in a way.
It does, and that's what.
But the next year they come back. You know what I mean?
Sure, but I think the one thing that is unique when you look at some of these, again, you look at Ryan Day and the immense, winning percentage and the number of games that he's actually won at Ohio State.
Yeah.
But I think where you have to be extremely critical, and this is what I hope for him and his staff, is you look at the losses. The losses are setting like historically bad data points.
Precedents,
with the lack of defense getting stops and the lack of offensive success, losing on third down, can't score a touchdown, settling for field goals, can't get points, can't score, can't get creative enough, or can't deviate again from that script.
Against equally good teams.
That's what I mean. Yes. And that's the standard. That's and in this case, again, I can't necessarily say, gosh, I actually didn't feel bad at all for Florida State, but I had a really good feeling that the same thing would have happened to us against Georgia had we played them.
Wow. Yeah.
Maybe not 60-3 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But I'm talking 35-10, 35-3.
There's no evidence to the contrary. I agree. Based on the way the offense played.
And you just got to think, look at, Georgia's going to be better than Missouri at every position because of who they've been winning the last 2 national championships and the way they recruit. So they're naturally going to have better players. And if the Missouri kids were, turning our offensive linemen into turnstiles and we couldn't get open against Missouri defensive backs, it's like, what's to say that we wouldn't have done the same thing against Georgia? And I know that FSU had, a dozen kids hit the
Yeah.
transfer
Oh,
portal or declare.
more than that, but yeah, horrible.
I think it was 25 scholarship players that were
Yeah.
out. But
Yeah.
still, I can't necessarily say that the team that we trotted out against Missouri would have been any different against Georgia.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
and so that's where we stick. And at the end of the day,
Okay.
here's what it comes down to. I'd like to, dive it into like now that Fry, I'm not calling for anybody's head. I think that,
Yeah.
it's on Day to reevaluate his staff. And again, I trust him making whatever decisions, but it'll be interesting to see the recruits that Fry's actually, helped bring to Ohio State and where they stack up and from a competition standpoint for next year. Where are the position battles on that O-line in the spring? Because if we can't run the football and we can't protect whomever, whether it's Lincoln, whether it's Devin Brown, whether it's Aaron Nolan, or whether it's some guy that, falls out of the sky from the transfer portal, if we can't protect him, the product's going to look the same.
Yeah. 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 Too bad. Matt, real quick before we go, obviously we're recording this. We're Truth and Advertise. We're recording this on New Year's Day, midday before the college football playoff games are taking place. Alabama taking on Michigan, and obviously Texas and Washington. But I think the feeling right now, and this is just quote being honest. We're always honest, but really being truly honest is you're coming out of this postseason. I am thinking Ohio State right now. I do not put Ohio State in that elite class like that, like I had them going into the year. And I thought Ohio State was going to win the game. My pick was 31-20. But I mean, the way the last two games of the season have gone the last 2 years, right? I don't have Ohio State in that what I'd call that upper 4 or 5 elite right now. They've got to get back there. I mean, do you agree with my assessment at this point, coming out of 2 straight years like this, where you lose in essence your last 2 games of the year?
I do.
When they really matter.
I do agree with you, but I do think there's a couple of games going on today, like the and I know that Oregon Liberty. I think it's going to be a runaway. Oregon's going to pull off what they kind of like they did against Colorado and probably put 50 on Liberty.
Yeah,
to prove a point. But I think Oregon, Washington, old Pac-12, new Big Ten teams.
Yes.
I think how they play today is. I also think like you look at Washington, is it going to be sustainable? If Penix leaves to go to the NFL, are they still going to be what Washington has been the last 2 football seasons? So I think us in Oregon, are right on the cusp on that outside the top 4. I think Georgia scored 60 because they could. I think Georgia scored 60 to show everybody that they thought they were one of the best 4 teams in the country. And when one of the two, if either of the 2 games later today aren't a good game, everyone's going to start saying Georgia should have got in because, 2-time national champion and unfortunate late loss, in the SEC championship game to Bama.
Yeah.
But I think you got to put Michigan there because of what Harbaugh's been able to do, to us and to every other opponent, and to get CFP the last 3 years. Bama's never out of the conversation, and we found that out this year when everybody counted them out. Then all they did was just win every game, after Texas. Again, I talked about Washington and Oregon, and I think you look at Georgia,
Texas,
Texas. I want to see Texas and Florida State sustain what they're doing. Texas going to the SEC and sustain that winning. And I'm not trying to say outside top 12. For next year, I'm saying can with Sarkisian, with those, because they're getting top 5 recruiting classes every year. Can they sustain this success? What happens with Ewers? Does he leave? Does Arch take over? Is very interesting dynamic. Penn State's, we're kind of in the Penn State zone now. That 6 to 11. Where we had always been inside that top 5, we've kind of fallen out of that top 5, which I just mentioned, and now we're always kind of like Penn State. Penn State's a really good football team. Wins all the games they're supposed to win and none of the big games. And now because we are Ohio State, and I'm going to put us, in that elite category with this narrative, but it's like losing to another elite team the last 3 years in Michigan, not playing, or getting to the college football playoff last year, not playing it this year, losing to Georgia, even though we should have been. That's the thing. I mean, in hindsight, we make a kick as the ball drops last year. We're a national champion last year.
Football.
It's football. And I also just think you look at this year, if we beat Michigan, I can't. This is a whole nother show, Tim.
I know
Is
it
like
is. We're going to do
if we
another one on it.
if
But
we if we beat if we beat Michigan,
yeah,
and beat Iowa, and we're in the college football playoff, Kyle McCord's still our quarterback.
yeah.
Does Marvin play in the CFP,
Oh
or does
yeah.
he
Yeah,
opt out?
he would have played. Yeah.
Right. How many of those guys that hit the portal? I'd say half still do because they're unhappy that they're never going to
Yeah.
play at Ohio State.
Oh
They're going
yeah.
to go find an
Yeah.
opportunity. The other half stay, I think, and pursue a national championship. But I'll say this: I still, even if Kyle McCord beats Michigan, I still question, is Kyle McCord the guy going into next season? He starts as the starter, but can Devin Brown or Lincoln or Aaron Noland in a healthy competition beat him out, and are we better served at Ohio State with one of those other guys besides Kyle? Because
Yeah.
I think Kyle had some blemishes in his game that was nothing like Stroud, Fields, and Haskins and Barrett, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That we're so accustomed to. So, I mean, are we better to have this crossroad conversation now than have it a year from now? With Kyle McCord, potentially winning a national championship and still might not be the guy.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, there
It's
was like
interesting.
you and I talked about it earlier, and other people did too. But there was just as well as Kyle played statistically, there was just something, and Ryan, they kept kind of saying it. We left some things out there. You know what I mean? I'm talking about
But
points.
I also
You know what I
question,
mean?
like, what statistics
Yeah.
when you look at, and I'll say that, like, the Stroud Field statistics are in like this
Yeah.
crazy
Other
tier, right?
zone.
Like
Yeah.
untouchable area. But
Yeah.
dropped the 45 touchdowns to 35.
Yeah.
Kyle was 8 short of 35.
Oh yeah. No, but I'm
You know,
saying, but he
so
played for the most part all year. He played well enough, but there were these moments in games, even when Ohio State seemed to have control of the game, where it seemed like he zoned out. You know what I mean?
yeah,
That's what I'm talking about. And you and I talked about that before. The
yeah,
production and Ryan Day, whatever you think of Ryan Day, like any other coach, judges offensive performance on production of touchdowns. You know,
yes,
and
yeah,
that's what you talked about. And then boom, the epitome of what you're talking about, we just watched in the Cotton Bowl, Zippo on
right,
touchdowns.
yeah,
And that just sort of like puts, in my opinion, an exclamation point on what finally was wrong with this team.
yeah,
The offensive line failed it at the wrong time, and they didn't have a dynamic quarterback, especially when Devin Brown limped off. You didn't have the dynamic quarterback to save the day. I'm
yeah.
not sure, it would have been interesting. That's what's got to get fixed. And that. And, we're talking about 1 year. A year ago, CJ Stroud had a ridiculous year. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this was a 1 year thing, but it seemed like longer than that. You know what I mean? I don't know how to, once you're at the top of the canyon, then you go back down in the
But
canyon.
you know what, Tim, and I'll say this though, and I'll just say, when you look at, and I'll use like Bama and Michigan as an example. Both of them with, like, just, I'll say Bama, like Jalen Milrow was like, I mean, they benched him at some point midseason.
Yeah. And then
You
they
know,
tailored their offense around him and boom.
that's what I mean. So it's, my whole point is, like, it's the in season flow where everything's not going great, and
Right.
a monkey wrench gets thrown in, you recover from it, and you're better because of it. But I think, like, when you look at Bama, it's like, Bama kind of stands for something, right?
Yeah.
They're always going to play great defense with Saban. They're always going to have explosive playmakers on offense. Now it's just about calling the right plays and going out and doing it, which is also
Yeah.
the hard part for these high school kids, or these college kids. But then you look at Michigan, it's like JJ McCarthy doesn't have to be CJ Stroud or Justin Fields for
True.
Michigan, because they have an identity to go win football games.
Yeah.
Because it's about playing great defense and running the football. And JJ McCarthy just can't make mistakes with the football off of play action or drop back pass.
Yeah.
It's you put them in the bubble, and it's like, this is the template to win. And I think that's the one thing that for Buckeye fans this year, and I'll just say, to go back to Kyle McCord and now this bowl game, is like, it was all kind of clunky all year and never really all that smooth.
Yeah.
And McCord having to force the football to Marvin late, when everybody in the stands, 100,000 people at the big house, 100,000 people at the horseshoe. No, Kyle McCord, when push comes to shove, is going to try to force that football, or Ryan Day is going to call that play to have Kyle McCord force that football to his number one target. when we needed the accessories to be able to distribute that football, which makes us extremely dangerous because we have 3, 4, and 5 stars at every position, on offense as a skill standpoint. And we need all of them to step out, which makes us, that becomes the identity. And I think that was what was so dangerous about Stroud and Fields. It's like Buka could go off. You had JSN could go off, Garrett Wilson and Olave and Marvin. And it's like in all of them playing together is what, that was our identity. Protecting that passer and distributing the football to our playmakers both on the ground and through the air. Right. And now we've lost that.
The last play against Michigan, Kyle McCord gets hit as he throws. The ball goes down. The guy makes a diving interception. Offensive line gaff because
Donovan
Jackson tripped over Carson Hinsman's foot and lets a guy just come free right at the quarterback.
Yep.
Basically the last play that mattered for Ohio State in the bowl game was Lincoln Kienholz getting hit and fumbling. And that's my point is it always starts. I don't care who you got at quarterback. Did you ever even heard of Brady Cook 4 years ago?
No.
Missouri's quarterback. But he delivered a couple of 3 huge plays, which made the difference on those drives, whether it was running or throwing and putting the ball right on the money. The point was he had time to do it for the most part.
Yeah.
And so it always starts up front. And nobody's going to push me off of that stance. They, from the get-go, this offensive line had problems, kind of settled out as the season went on against what I call lesser opponents. But when push came to shove in the 2 biggest games of the year, it wasn't there. So that's my take on it. Hey, last thing I wanted to ask you. Is there anything about this, just in the short nutshell, is there anything about this defense you want to see even evolve even more after a year of Jim Knowles, them not giving up the big play? Well, Missouri hit a couple, let's put it that way, but for the most part, not giving up the big play. What do you want to see this defense different about this defense a year from now when we're talking?
I would love to see and I know it mildly goes against what we became this year. And I'm not in any trying to say like get blitz happy. I'd love to see a little bit more creativity in the blitz game, and that's really kind of coming from our second level. That's the integration of Sonny Styles, in and around the box, being a little bit more active as a blitzer, and 3-5 times a game. I'd love to see, and this goes back to some of my days both at Ohio State and then of course the National Football League. Is some of that middle dog cross stuff, that's D'Antonio, that's Mark Snyder, that whole Mel Tucker middle dog cross where you're bringing both backers, forcing some of your defensive ends who aren't, you're not dropping the Bosa brothers. The Bosa brothers are coming, but if your guys aren't getting home on the edges, have them drop back, in certain situations to close some of those windows and bring your inside backers. I know we brought Tommy, we brought 5, a decent portion. But I think when you look at Georgia and you look at Bama, which, at the high school level, like we're watching them to integrate at eds, how we evolve and get better, right? With some of those concepts, blitz game, roll coverage behind it. I just think there's some creative ways to do that. But then on the flip side, I thought, we took a big step. And I think if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, you look at what, Schwartz has done with the Browns defense. It's like when you have elite guys up top, up front, and everybody's doing their job on the back end, you can, like Missouri did against us, you rush 4, drop 7, and make that quarterback throw great balls under duress with Myles Garrett or Jack Sawyer or JTT or, Zadarius Smith, bearing down on you, and you have to deliver the ball accurately. So I think there's a push-pull to it. So I think the evolution of a little bit more creative blitz game with some disguise coverage behind it, as opposed to just playing, just typical cover 3 zone or man free.
Matt Wilhelm, as always, you bring the heat, even on simmer. You know what I mean? Some of these points you got to listen, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you make stew, right?
Get
Bama,
out there Texas National Championship, Tim. Bama, Texas National Championship.
And ladies and gentlemen, truth and evidence, I'm sitting in my brother's weekend ranch, he calls it, here right outside of LaGrange, Texas. As I told Matt at the beginning, and the games of the year have not been played yet as we record this. But I've got, I think Washington. We're recording before the game. Michael Penix Jr., man. if they're in the game in the fourth quarter, this guy figures out a way to get down the field
Yeah.
with his football team.
Yeah.
But I like Texas and I like Alabama, and I see a rematch. Do you see the same thing?
I do too. I've been and it's not I think the Washington Texas game is probably going to be scored in the 30s,
Yeah,
36, 33, 38, 35, something like that. And I
yeah,
think that the Bama Michigan game is probably going to be in the 20s, 24-21, 27-24. But it's going to be a defensive battle. It's probably going to be boring at some point to some fans who want the sexy, high scoring football game, but they're going to get that later at night. But I think, Bama, Nick Saban on defense with Jalen Milrow on offense and what Michigan does to stop him, with his legs, but also improved as a passer as the season went on. So
oh yeah,
it's I was excited to have Bama get in. I also have to say that it was hilarious when they were showing the Michigan team room, them expecting to get Florida State in with all those opt outs and no
yeah.
quarterback.
They
And the
seem
whole
more
room,
disappointed. They seem more disappointed than Florida State did. I mean,
they were like, ah,
yeah,
yeah. They wanted the layup to get to the national championship, and they're not going to get that layup.
no layup.
But things are changing both at Ohio State. I think things are changing along the college landscape between NIL, transfer portal. I think the evolution of sign stealing to headsets will change the
Yeah,
college game as we know it.
yeah,
Some of the allegations against Michigan, what happens to Harbaugh, regardless of whether they win today or play in the national championship, win the national championship, those other violations that came out. So it's going to be a very interesting offseason for college football.
yeah. Hey, we're going to come back, later in the month, and we're going to talk about some things, especially like you just talked about, for example, probably going to headsets or in headset helmets next year, I would think. But how that's going to change the dynamic of Ohio State even calling plays, because you know uh, they're used to like being out there spread out. The play coming in, the quarterback doesn't really call the play; it's called from
No.
the sideline. Now the quarterback's going to have to distribute the play, you know, via
Yeah.
a huddle or something like that.
Yeah.
That's going to change things. I mean,
It is, and it's also going to it's going to change the pace of games. It's going to I'll
yes,
say for Lane Kiffin, who
yeah,
wants to I want 75 offensive plays. Like that's the goal. They want to
yes,
they want a sugar huddle, they want a muddle huddle, they want to go no huddle and push the pace of the football game. And this will naturally slow things down. It'd be
slow
interesting to
things
see
down.
if it's going to be mandatory, if it's going to be you're going to opt into it,
Yeah,
how it's going to go. It's going to
yeah.
be very interesting.
Yeah, I would think there could be no rule that says you can't signal in plays if that's the way you want to do it, but you're kind of living in the past if you stick with that based on what we've seen, and the evidence has come out, et cetera. Because everybody in one form or fashion is trying to steal signals, even at least once the game begins.
Yeah.
So this is the next step toward the NFLication of major college
Yeah.
football. I'm not sure I like everything that's going on in all kinds of ways, but we'll touch on that
I'm going to
later.
make one last little pitch too. And this is, again, as a former player who did not receive $1 of NIL money, uh, the Ohio State has the largest alumni base in the entire world
Yeah.
because of the undergrads at Ohio State. All of you, if you want to see Buckeye football get better and you want to support the program, you got to pump some money into a collective, whether that's 1870 Society or wherever. It's to play at the level, it's very clear that we can't get away with just getting the kids that we always get and developing them in our program and them going out and playing their best and representing
Yeah.
the Scarlet and Gray the way we wanted to.
Yeah.
To compete, there's money involved now, and I think that our fan base needs to support their players. Again, whatever it may be, give what you can, but it's to go buy the players that'll go buy us and win us. If I told you we had these three players, in our recruiting class, we'd beat Michigan, win the Big Ten championship, and play for college national championship, would you donate?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it's going to take. You
Yeah.
know, uh,
It's just amazing. This is like a Southern Baptist church now, man. They're passing the plate. I mean,
but it's just
you know what I'm
it's just the
talking
nature.
about.
It's a business now. I think that
Yeah.
Ohio State was late to the game on the NIL to begin with. I think Notre Dame's even further from it because they feel like they offer more value with what Notre Dame represents. But they're going to have to become a player to go
Oh,
get the
yeah.
kids that are going to make them relevant. Otherwise,
Yeah.
they're going to fade into the shadows.
Well, 2 straight years they're going to be playing with the transfer quarterback Notre Dame is Sam Hartman, and then now
Right.
the kid from Duke.
Yeah,
I love
Riley
that.
Leonard.
Yeah, I like that guy a lot, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a guy I would have gone after. I think Ohio State did make inroads
And you see,
in some
Cam
form or
Ward
fashion.
actually declared for the NFL draft, so
Yeah,
he's not going to
yeah,
play college
he's not
football.
going to
So
play. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Tim, for
All
having
right,
me.
absolutely, Matt. You know that, man. And I will see you later this month. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week.
Happy New Year.